My son watched his wife shove me onto his own kitchen floor, and he didn't say a single word. A week later, he found out I owned the entire building he'd been boasting about for years. That was the day he stopped calling me old man and started begging. Before I go on, let me say something from the heart. If you're here, listening to an old man's story, it truly means a great deal to me. Feel free to subscribe, or just tell me where you're listening from. Every story I share carries a small piece of my life, and your presence here brings more comfort than you might realize. My name is Thomas Marino, and at 74, I thought I knew how the last years of my life would unfold. Quiet mornings. A slow cup of coffee. A little woodworking behind my old house. Nothing extravagant, but peaceful. Mine. But life has a way of shifting beneath you when you least expect it. It started with a fall. A simple slip on wet porch steps after a fall of rain. A sharp flash of pain. A ride in an ambulance I barely remember. And then a surgeon telling me I wouldn't be able to live alone for a while, maybe a long while. My son, Daniel, insisted I stay with him in downtown Seattle. His wife, Claire, echoed the invitation with a smile that felt polite, but tight. "Just until you're steady again, Tom," she said, patting my arm lightly. I told myself not to read into it. Daniel was my boy. I didn't want to burden him more than life already had. They lived high above the city near the waterfront. Glass walls, white furniture, chrome everywhere. A home meant for magazine photos, not for people with canes and old hips. My small suitcase looked out of place the moment it rolled across their polished floor. Still, I tried. I really did. Every morning I'd wake before either of them. Old habits. I'd make coffee, stretch my leg the way the therapist taught me, and sit by the window watching ferries drift across the Sound. From far away, Seattle looks calm. Up close, well, that's another story. Daniel worked in tech, long hours, late nights, constant stress. Claire worked from home, or so she said. Mostly I saw her scrolling through her tablet or rearranging decorations that were already arranged. At first, she was polite. A small reminder here, a clipped suggestion there. "Please don't leave your cane by the door, Tom. Could you wipe the counters after making coffee? You use too much detergent. Let's avoid that next time." Little things, nothing worth starting a war over, but small cracks, if ignored, become fault lines. Daniel never seemed to notice, or maybe he didn't want to. He'd come home exhausted, rubbing the bridge of his nose, barely touching dinner. Some nights, he'd talk to me about work or old memories from when he was a kid, and I'd listen. I've always listened. We weren't perfect, but I believed our bond was solid. I believed it because a father needs to believe something. To pull my weight, I tried to help, fold laundry, sweep, cook simple meals. My hip made everything slow, but effort counts for something. Or at least, I thought it did. Their apartment had no warmth. But I tried to bring some in. One afternoon, while Daniel worked and Claire was out, I opened my late wife Maria's old recipe book. The spine cracked gently as I turned to her winter stew, the recipe that made the whole house smell like family. Just seeing her handwriting, it steadied me, made me feel like she was sitting beside me, humming the way she used to while chopping onions. I decided to cook a pot. Just a small one. Something to share, something warm. I chopped the vegetables slowly. I stirred the broth until the aroma filled the air. For a moment, I forgot about my cane, forgot about the stiffness in my hip, forgot I was a guest in a home built for sleek lines, not memories. For a moment, I felt like myself again. The stew simmered. The light softened through the window. My heart eased. I didn't know it then, but that quiet hour in their kitchen would be the last gentle moment I'd feel in that apartment. Everything after that shifted. I didn't know it then, but that silence was the last real peace I'd feel for a long time. I wish I could tell you the breaking point arrived with thunder, loud, unmistakable, impossible to ignore. But betrayal rarely comes that way. It arrives quietly, then strikes all at once. The stew had been simmering for nearly an hour. It smelled exactly like Maria used to make it, warm, rich, comforting. I leaned on the counter, resting my hip, stirring in slow circles the way she taught me. Those small circles, they steadied my hands and my heart. The front door opened. Claire's heels clicked across the floor, sharp enough to break a fragile moment. She didn't greet me, just sniffed the air. "What is that smell?" I smiled, trying to soften the room. "Just making a little dinner. Thought it might be nice." Her hand cut through my sentence. No, no, Tom, we talked about this. She walked farther into the kitchen, her eyes narrowing as if the steam itself offended her. You can't keep treating my kitchen like it's your old cabin stove. Her kitchen, not the kitchen. A small word, but it landed hard. I cleaned everything afterward, I said quietly. I'm only trying to help. She stepped closer. Too close. Help? You? She said, looking around as if searching for proof of my failure. You can barely walk without that cane. And now look. She yanked open the cabinet door and pointed to a single drop of broth. Her voice tightened. See? This is exactly what I'm talking about. You make more work for me. Before I could answer, Daniel walked in. He looked exhausted, dark circles, slumped shoulders, but he still managed a faint smile when he saw me. Hey, Dad. Something smells great. It would smell better, Claire snapped. If your father didn't spill food everywhere. I felt myself freeze. A simple stew. A small splash. Suddenly it was an indictment. Daniel rubbed his forehead. Claire, come on. It's just dinner. Just dinner? She said, spinning toward him. She had an edge in her voice I hadn't heard before. Your father doesn't listen. He's careless. He ruins everything in this kitchen. Her voice rose. Louder. Sharper. And don't defend him. You do that all the time. All the time. The words stung because they weren't about me anymore. They were about a crack in their marriage she wanted to glue shut with blame. I reached for the pot, wanting to move it off the burner. My hand slipped. My cane slid just an inch. But an inch is enough when the ground beneath you is already unsteady. The pot tipped, hit the island, and exploded onto the floor in a violent splash of red. Stew everywhere. Cabinets, tiles. My shirt, my hands, and me, down on one knee, gripping the counter as pain seared through my hip. Claire gasped, but not out of worry. Out of disgust. Oh, unbelievable. Look at this. Look at what you've done. Her voice rose another octave, cutting through me. Do you see this, Daniel? Do you see what your father does? He can't be trusted in here. Not with anything. I tried to stand, but my hip refused. My hand shook as I braced myself. It was an accident, I whispered. Just an accident. Her eyes hardened. Everything you do is an accident. Daniel stepped forward. For a heartbeat, I thought he'd help me up. But instead, he reached for the remote on the counter. And without a word, he turned the volume up on the television. Loud enough to drown her out. Loud enough to drown me out. Loud enough to pretend this moment wasn't happening. I stared at him. Not angry, just hollow. He didn't look at me. He didn't look at Claire. He just disappeared into the noise. Something in my chest broke, not loudly, but with a soft, final snap. Claire folded her arms. You'd better clean this up, Tom. I just had these cabinets polished. She walked away. Daniel stayed turned toward the TV. I slowly rose, leaning heavily on the counter, the stew soaking cold against my clothes. Humiliation doesn't always scream. Sometimes it whispers. You don't belong here anymore. But the worst part of that night, the part they didn't know, was the letter in my pocket. The letter that would change everything. A letter explaining that the building they lived in, the tower she guarded like a castle, was no longer theirs to control. And that's when something inside me stopped bending. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't argue. I just gathered myself, one breath at a time. Because in that moment, I knew I would not stay silent. I didn't raise my voice, but something inside me went very, very quiet. I didn't clean the stew right away, not because I didn't want to, but because my hands wouldn't stop shaking. The apartment felt strangely louder after the argument, not from noise, but from the weight of everything left unsaid. Claire pacing somewhere down the hall. Daniel sitting motionless, pretending the TV could erase what he just witnessed. And me standing there, broth cooling on my shirt, feeling smaller than I had in years. I picked up a towel, wiped my palms slowly, then made my way to the guest room, my room, though it always felt more like a storage unit dressed as a bedroom. No windows, no warmth, just a bed that creaked if I breathed too heavily. I closed the door behind me. Only then did I allow myself to sit down. My hip throbbed again, that dull, punishing ache, but the deeper pain was somewhere else entirely. My chest felt tight, my thoughts scattered. It wasn't the fall that hurt, not the stain on my shirt, not even the stew dripping down the cabinets. It was the silence. The way Daniel had turned the volume up, like it was the easiest solution. There was a time that boy gripped my hand so tight crossing the street I had to pry his fingers off. A time he used to bring me dandelions from the yard and tell me they were flowers with wishes. A time my presence meant comfort, not inconvenience. Where had all of that gone? I exhaled shakily and pulled at the damp fabric stuck to my skin. The shirt had a small tear now, right near the cuff. Maria had bought me that shirt years ago. Seeing it ruined felt like losing a memory I wasn't ready to part with. When Maria died, I promised her I'd live with dignity. "Don't let the world make you smaller, Tom," she used to whisper. "Not you." I had tried. I really had. But dignity is fragile when you're treated like a burden. Rain began tapping against the building, soft at first, then steady. Seattle rain always sounded like someone knocking gently on your thoughts, asking to be let in. For a moment, I considered leaving that very night, packing my small suitcase, calling a cab, disappearing into the city like a tired shadow. But two things stopped me: my hip and the letter. I reached into my shirt pocket, pulling it out with slow fingers. The envelope was thick, the paper crisp, the ink elegant. It looked out of place in that sparse little room. I opened it again, carefully, reverently. It still didn't feel real. A trust, established by Maria nearly 30 years earlier. Investments that blossomed quietly through decades of her careful planning. And the detail that made my breath catch every time I read it. The trust held controlling ownership of Harbor Crest Tower, Daniel and Claire's building, their prized, pristine tower overlooking the Sound. And now all of it rested in my hands. I stared at the letter until the words blurred, not from confusion, but from the weight of what it meant. I could walk away from that apartment forever, move somewhere warm, somewhere quiet, somewhere no one would speak to me like I was an unwanted guest. But then I pictured Daniel's thumb pressing that remote button, that small, familiar click that confirmed just how invisible I'd become. Parents forgive many things, we're built to. But forgiveness without accountability, that isn't forgiveness. It's surrender. My hand tightened around the letter. A memory slipped in, one I hadn't thought of in years. Daniel at 8 years old, crying over a broken mixing bowl. He thought I'd be angry. Instead, I knelt beside him and gathered the pieces carefully. "You fix what you can," I told him. "And what you can't fix, you learn from." I wondered if he remembered that moment. I wondered when he stopped learning. Pain shot through my hip as I stood again, but my mind was steady, clearer than it had been in years. No yelling, no revenge whispered through gritted teeth, no late-night confrontation, just thoughtful, deliberate resolve. I set the letter on the nightstand beside my reading glasses. The small lamp cast a warm circle of light around it, like it was something sacred. In a way, it was. Outside, the rain deepened. Inside, something inside me hardened into place, not bitterness, but certainty. This was no longer my home. Not emotionally, not spiritually, not in any way that mattered. And I whispered to the quiet room, "I won't let them shrink me anymore." Sleep came in broken pieces that night, each one drifting through memories of Daniel and Claire. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw myself on that kitchen floor. I saw Daniel turning that volume up. Between raindrops and recollection, one thought rose again and again. If they wanted to treat me like a guest, then they would soon learn who truly owned the house. Morning would bring a new day, and with it, a plan that had been waiting for years. Some nights, I whispered their names, not in anger, but in disbelief at how far we'd fallen. Morning arrived without permission, soft, gray, and quiet. I hadn't slept more than an hour, but my mind felt sharper than it had in months. My hips still throbbed, yes, but the fog inside me had lifted. I reached for the letter again. Not to reread it, the words were carved into me now, but to remind myself that power sometimes comes in the smallest, quietest envelopes. I sat at the tiny desk squeezed against the wall. Claire once called it my office, though it barely had space for a notebook. Still, it was enough. I opened my pad, clicked the pen, and began writing. Step 1. Confirm full transfer of trust authority. Step 2. Assume control of Harbor Crest Tower operations. Step 3. Anonymity. That last line I underlined twice. Lessons land deeper when people don't see the teacher coming. I dialed the attorney's number printed beneath the signature. A warm, steady voice answered. "This is Harold Pierce. How may I assist you, Mr. Marino? I cleared my throat, forcing calm into my voice. Yes, Mr. Pierce. I received a letter from your office regarding a trust established by my late wife, Maria. A pause. Then a tone of recognition. Ah, yes. We've been waiting for your call. Waiting. The ground shifted under me again, but this time I didn't sway. We arranged to meet that afternoon. I packed quietly, wallet, cane, the trust documents, and Maria's old locket. Everything else in that little room could stay. None of it felt like mine. I left without speaking to Daniel or Claire. Not out of resentment, just acceptance. When a door stops opening for you, eventually you stop knocking. The elevator ride down was strangely peaceful. The lobby even more so. A taxi was waiting, and the driver nodded as though he knew I needed silence more than conversation. Seattle's streets glistened from the night's rain. Fog curled between buildings like the city was waking with a long, slow yawn. At the law office, Mr. Pierce greeted me with the kind of handshake men give when they've spent decades solving other people's storms. Silver hair. Quiet eyes. A presence that steadied the room. Your wife planned very carefully, he said, spreading documents across the table. She intended for this trust to safeguard your future, especially if circumstances became difficult. I swallowed hard. Maria always thought ahead. She could sense trouble long before I did. Sometimes I wondered if she still could. Mr. Pierce pointed to the ownership structure. Harbor Crest Tower. Your trust controls 71%. Effective immediately, you are the primary decision maker. I leaned back slowly, letting the meaning settle. Claire's marble floors. Daniel's rented pride. Their gleaming, spotless tower. Mine. I exhaled. Long, steady, almost therapeutic. How discreet can this process be? I asked. Mr. Pierce's smile deepened. As discreet as you'd like. We can operate entirely under a management alias. They will see notices from Northbridge Property Group, nothing more. Perfect. Revenge is rarely about fire. It's frost. You let people feel the cold they once handed you, inch by inch. We spent nearly 2 hours reviewing lease agreements, financial structures, and tenant protocols. No rush. Old age teaches you that slow steps often lead to the most deliberate destinations. By the time I stood to leave, I had everything I needed. Legal control, financial authority, a shield of anonymity, and a clean, quiet plan. Back at the hotel Mr. Pierce arranged, a modest suite, warm, simple, mine. I sat at the desk and wrote the first directive. Effective next cycle, Unit 18B will receive a rent adjustment to current market rate plus 20%. Strict enforcement of tenant conduct policies will follow. Unit 18B, Daniel and Claire. No vengeance in the ink, only accountability. I whispered the story's title without meaning to. My son let his wife humiliate me in his own home, then the part no one knew, and then he found out who owned the building. Not anger, not triumph, just truth. That night I ate dinner in the hotel restaurant. Salmon, steamed vegetables, hot tea. Soft jazz played. The air was warm. A simple kindness from the waiter, a refill without asking, felt like a luxury I hadn't had in months. I imagined Daniel opening that first notice, the confusion tightening his brow, the questions, the sudden uncertainty. I imagined Claire's fury, her perfect world cracking just enough for light to slip through and reveal the truth she had refused to see. I didn't smile, but something inside me settled. The stage was set. All I had to do now was wait. They had no idea that silence can build walls stronger than words. 3 quiet weeks passed before the storm finally arrived. Not an angry storm, a cold, revealing one. While I healed, walking the waterfront, drinking morning tea by the hotel window, Harbor Crest Tower was adjusting to its new, unseen owner. The management company, now answering directly to me, followed every instruction precisely. The first notice, a rent increase to reflect the true market rate, something Claire had conveniently benefited from for years. The second, a written warning for excessive noise and repeated altercations. The third, a tenant conduct violation after Claire verbally assaulted the concierge. Each envelope carried the new header, Northbridge Property Group, my mask. I wanted Daniel and Claire off balance, wondering who was on the other side of those letters, wondering why their once comfortable life suddenly felt colder. Then, one rainy evening, as fog crept over the sound, my phone lit up with a number I didn't recognize. I answered anyway. Dad? Daniel's voice trembled on the word. It had been weeks since he'd spoken to me with anything resembling tenderness. Yes, son, I said quietly. We got a notice. They're evicting us. His breath hitched. Claire's losing it. She's been screaming for hours. She broke a lamp. I needed to call someone. He paused, swallowing hard. I didn't know who else to talk to. Something in my chest tightened. Not anger, not satisfaction. Just the ache of a parent who sees their child finally recognizing a truth they avoided for too long. Where are you now? I asked. In the apartment. She locked herself in the bedroom. Dad, I'm scared. I'll come, I said. A fragile silence followed. Why? He whispered. After everything, why would you? I answered him honestly. Because you're still my son. I ended the call before either of us could second guess it. The lobby staff recognized me instantly now. Not as the quiet, limping father who used to trail behind his son, but as the owner who preferred to move without fanfare. The night guard nodded respectfully. Mr. Reno, security is already upstairs. The elevator doors closed, humming softly as it lifted me toward the 18th floor. With each passing level, the muffled sounds of an argument grew sharper. When I stepped out, 2 security officers were waiting. I nodded, and they fell in behind me. I knocked. The door flew open. Claire stood there, hair wild, mascara streaked, fury pouring off her like steam. The kind of rage that has nowhere to go but outward. Her eyes locked onto me. You, she spat. What do you want? Behind her, the apartment looked like a storm had passed through. A shattered lamp on the floor. A chair overturned. A picture frame cracked. Daniel stood near the kitchen island, pale, shaking, eyes red. I came for my son, I said. She laughed, a sharp, humorless sound that scraped the air. Your son? He lives with me. He stays here. You don't just show up like you matter. Daniel flinched. Claire lifted her chin. You caused this, she hissed. That rent hike? That eviction notice? You did this by being careless and weak. Weak. The same word she'd thrown at me in the kitchen. I stepped past her calmly, leaning on my cane. The officers stayed by the door. Daniel looked at me, confused and desperate all at once. Dad, you shouldn't be here. I think I should, I said softly. Claire crossed her arms. You don't get to make decisions here. You don't even live here. I turned fully toward her. That, I said, is where you're mistaken. Her smirk faltered. Daniel frowned. Dad, what are you talking about? I reached into my coat and handed him the envelope. Heavy, thick, undeniable. He opened it slowly. His eyes scanned the first page. His breathing stopped. He read the next page. His hand shook. He reached the signature line, and his knees nearly buckled. Dad, this says you own Harbor Crest. His voice was barely sound. You own this entire building? I nodded once. Claire lunged for the papers, snatching them. No, this is fake. This has to be fake. You expect me to believe you own a multi-million-dollar tower? You can't even... I raised my hand gently. She stopped speaking. Even she could feel the shift. My wife planned for my future, I said. And now, that future includes ensuring I'm treated with dignity. Her voice shrank. You're evicting us. I'm evicting you, I said, keeping my tone calm. Daniel is welcome to come with me when he's ready. Daniel inhaled sharply. Claire's rage flared one last time before collapsing into disbelief. You can't do this. I have rights. You had kindness, I said softly, and a family, and a home. And you treated all of it like it belonged beneath you. Her mouth fell open, but no sound followed. The security officers stepped forward. Ma'am, please gather your personal items. Daniel stared at the floor, rubbing his temples. Dad, I'm sorry, he whispered. I didn't know. I swear, I didn't know she treated you like that. I placed a hand on his shoulder. I know, I said gently, and now you do. And in that quiet, trembling moment, I felt something inside me release. A weight I had carried for far too long finally loosened. Sometimes the loudest moment in life is when you say nothing at all. The apartment was quiet after Claire finally left. Her footsteps echoed down the hall, sharp and fast, until the elevator swallowed the sound completely. Daniel stood in the doorway, shoulders slumped, hands trembling. Not from fear, from recognition, from realizing just how much he had ignored. and how far things had gone. I picked up his jacket from the back of the chair and laid it gently over his arm. "Come on," I said softly. "Let's leave this place." We walked out together. No shouting, no drama. Just a father and son leaving a home that had never really been ours. The night air hit my face. Cool, damp, forgiving. I exhaled and felt something heavy lift from my chest. Over the next months, Daniel moved into a smaller apartment. He began therapy, slowly learning to trust himself. He returned to woodworking, letting his hands remember the rhythm of creating, not breaking. I watched him color return to his cheeks, watched him laugh again, watched him become the man he had almost forgotten how to be. As for me, I reclaimed a different life. Simple, quiet, and mine. One where I woke without flinching at footsteps or harsh words. I used part of the trust to create the Merino Foundation, named for Maria, to help seniors find safe housing when their own families forget dignity exists. Most mornings, I sit by the window with my coffee. I watch the ferries cross the Sound. Seattle still rains more than I like, but there's comfort in the rhythm. And sometimes, Daniel joins me. We talk. We cook. We walk carefully around each other, learning a new rhythm. One evening, he asked the question he had been holding for months. "Dad, why didn't you tell me you owned the building?" I smiled, slow, patient. "Because, son, respect isn't something you announce. It's something you reclaim, when the moment is right." He nodded, understanding settling in his eyes. The story wasn't about revenge at all. It was about dignity, boundaries, the quiet strength of someone who refuses to be diminished. And I finally understood the lesson Maria had left me. Respect, once lost, can be reclaimed if you wait for the right moment. Maybe justice isn't loud or fast. Maybe it's simply being able to sleep in peace again. Would you have done the same in my place? Tell me in the comments. And if you'd like to hear more stories like this, please subscribe. Your presence here matters more than you know.